The windshield was caved in, not cracked, not chipped, caved in like something heavy had been swung into it with intent. A single scratch ran the full length of the driver's side door. The hood had a dent near the center, deep and deliberate. This wasn't road debris. This wasn't an accident. Someone had stood in our driveway in the middle of the night and they had taken their time. Tucked under the broken wiper was a folded note. This wasn't random. Random damage doesn't leave a note. I didn't touch it. I stood there in the early morning silence of our new neighborhood, looking at what had been done to my wife's car, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not just anger. Something closer to the feeling you get when you realize you were chosen, and you don't yet know why. Jennifer came outside a few minutes later. She saw the car. She set her coffee on the porch railing. She walked over slowly, read the note without touching it, and was quiet for a long moment. Then she went inside and came back with latex gloves. She photographed the note in place first. Then the car, every panel, every angle. When she crouched down to document the scratch along the door, she paused, just for a second. Her jaw tightened slightly. She didn't say anything about it, and I didn't ask. Some things don't need to be said out loud. We had moved to this neighborhood 3 weeks earlier. It was a quiet, well-kept community outside of Austin, Texas. Clean streets, maintained lawns, the kind of neighborhood that looks from the outside like people genuinely care about where they live. What we didn't understand yet was the difference between a neighborhood that cares and a neighborhood that has learned to comply. The HOA was chaired by a woman named Diane. She came to our door on the second day with a welcome packet. That sounds warm. It wasn't. The packet was 12 pages, tabbed and highlighted with specific rules underlined. She walked us through the parking regulations twice. She explained the lawn maintenance schedule with the calm precision of someone who had given this speech many times and expected to give it many more. On her way out, she paused at the door and said, pleasantly, almost as an afterthought, "We keep thorough records on every property in the community. It really does help protect everyone's investment." She smiled. She left. I stood in our entryway thinking about that sentence for longer than I should have. It wasn't a threat. It was something more unsettling than a threat. It was a reminder, you are being watched. This is normal here. This is just how it works. The week before the vandalism, Jennifer had received the news she'd been working toward for 15 years. She was appointed chief of police for our city. We didn't make a big event of it. We had a quiet dinner at home. I surprised her with a new car, not extravagant, just something that felt like a marker of everything she'd earned. When it arrived, she ran her hand along the hood and said quietly, "I'm not used to having things I'm afraid to lose." We left it in the driveway that night. We didn't think about Rule 7B. The note said, "Vehicles must be stored in the garage between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. This is your first and final warning. HOA board." Jennifer filed a police report that same morning. But she did something else first, something that mattered. She immediately recused herself from any involvement in the investigation. She was the victim and the department head, a conflict she wasn't willing to create, even quietly. The case was assigned to the property crimes unit under a lieutenant who operated independently. She stepped back completely. She told me later that it wasn't a hard decision. It was the only decision. The detective assigned retrieved the note as physical evidence. He submitted a formal request for footage from a neighbor's ring camera. Fingerprint analysis entered the processing queue. These things move at the pace of procedure, not urgency, and that's appropriate because rushed investigations fall apart. We waited. Life continued uncomfortably in the same neighborhood where it had happened. 3 weeks after the vandalism, we attended our first HOA meeting. Diane was already seated when we arrived. She had a way of filling a room without raising her voice. The agenda was set before anyone else had settled in. The meeting opened on time, followed her structure, and acknowledged her priorities. Other board members deferred to her naturally, not because they agreed with everything, but because the path of least resistance ran directly through her approval. She didn't acknowledge the vandalism directly. Instead, midway through her opening remarks, she referenced the board's ongoing commitment to consistent and fair enforcement of community standards. She didn't look at us when she said it. She didn't need to. Jennifer waited until Diane finished. She raised her hand. Diane recognized her with a polished nod and an open palm gesture after you. Then, almost without moving, she straightened the agenda papers in front of her. A small adjustment, unnecessary, the kind of thing you do when you need to feel in control of something. Jennifer stood. She didn't speak immediately. The pause lasted maybe 5 seconds. The air conditioning hummed. That was the only sound in the room. In those 5 seconds, a man across the table set his phone face down. A woman near the back straightened in her chair. 2 board members exchanged a glance that they probably didn't mean to be visible. Nobody shuffled papers. Nobody coughed. "My name is Jennifer," she said. Her voice was level. "I was recently appointed chief of police for the city. I want the board to know that the vandalism to my vehicle 3 weeks ago is an active criminal investigation assigned to the property crimes unit. I've recused myself due to a conflict of interest. I'm not raising this to create alarm. I'm raising it because it's a matter of public record and the board should be aware." She sat down. Diane responded after a pause that lasted just a beat too long. She said the board hoped the matter would be resolved quickly. She said the neighborhood valued safety. She said she was confident confident it was an isolated incident. Her voice was composed. Her hands were flat on the table, but the woman beside her had stopped writing, and one board member was staring at the middle distance with the expression of someone quietly doing math. The silence that followed Diane's response was different from the silence before it. The investigation concluded 7 weeks after it opened. The Ring camera footage, once retrieved and reviewed, showed 2 individuals approaching the vehicle after midnight. Partial face captures and clothing were sufficient for identification purposes. Fingerprint analysis, returned in week 5, matched the note. Cross-referenced with the footage and additional witness statements, the detective built a complete case. The individuals identified were Diane's 2 sons, one 19, one 17. Diane herself had been visible in the footage, standing on her front porch. Warrants were obtained. Diane and her adult son were charged with felony vandalism and criminal conspiracy. The younger son entered juvenile proceedings. Diane faced an additional charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. She was released on bail pending trial. That evening, Jennifer walked out to the garage. She stood beside the car for a moment, the car that had started all of this. She closed the passenger door that had been left slightly open, exhaled slowly. Then she said, more to herself than to me, "That's done." That was all. We went back inside. The neighborhood found out the way neighborhoods find out, gradually, then all at once. What surprised us wasn't that people were relieved. It was how carefully they had been holding everything. A woman down the street came to our door first. She talked slowly, like someone choosing words they'd kept stored for a long time. She had received a formal written warning over a potted plant on her front step, a terracotta pot, flowers she had grown herself. She had removed it the same day. She had never said anything about it to anyone. A couple near the corner mentioned being fined during a period when they were managing a serious family illness. They had paid without contesting. Diane had once mentioned, conversationally, that she maintained a good relationship with someone in the county assessor's office. They had never confirmed whether that meant anything. They had never wanted to find out. None of these stories was dramatic. That was the point. What Diane had built didn't require drama. It required consistency, a steady, low-level pressure that made resistance feel costlier than compliance. Fine by fine, warning by warning, year by year. The neighborhood had organized itself around her comfort, not out of respect, but out of exhaustion. The HOA board convened an emergency session in the 6th week following the arrests. The process was slow. Bylaws, liability reviews, legal counsel, and a formal vote. 2 board members resigned. Interim leadership was appointed. A full audit of fines and governance documents was initiated. The overnight parking rule was among the first rescinded. Diane's criminal case moved into the court system, scheduled for a hearing several months out. She sold her house before the trial date, quietly, without announcement. The car was fully repaired within 6 weeks. Insurance covered most of it. I think about this differently now than I did when it was happening. It wasn't really a story about one person's bad behavior. It was a story about how control operates inside small, closed communities. HOAs, buildings, boards, anywhere that one person gets to set the rules and also enforce them. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be obvious. It just needs to make silence feel like the safer option. Fine by fine, warning by warning, year by year, that's how it sustains itself, not through power. Through the calculation that speaking up costs more than staying quiet. What changed here wasn't just Diane's situation. What changed was that one process, followed correctly, made that calculation wrong. Control survives on silence. It collapses the moment someone decides the process matters more than the pressure. If you've been in a community where one person held more authority than they should have, over parking, over appearances, over the unspoken rules of daily life, leave a comment. More people have a version of this story than ever say so out loud. And if you're new to this channel, subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. They're not always this close to home, but they're always real.